Today you will find out what is happening behind the scenes of the United States hunt for Maduro in Venezuela that they didn't tell you. Like the video so more people know and comment your opinion. It begins with silence, an unsettling silence that seems to swallow entire neighborhoods. Imagine walking through a Caracas street you once knew as loud and chaotic, where vendors shouted prices, buses honked endlessly, and children ran barefoot chasing soccer balls. Now, all you hear is the faint whistle of the wind through broken windows and doors left ajar. Families who once filled these homes are simply gone. No goodbyes, no traces, just empty rooms and a haunting question. Where did they go? This is not the story of a natural disaster or a migration wave. This is about mysterious disappearances that took place in Venezuela, right in the shadow of a political storm, after the United States launched an aggressive push against Nicolás Maduro's regime. These vanishings remain unexplained, and for the families left behind, every unanswered phone call, every missing photograph, and every unclaimed personal item has become a scar etched into memory. The backdrop to this tragedy is a country already drowning in chaos. Venezuela had long been fractured by economic collapse, shortages of medicine and food, and brutal clashes between protesters and security forces. But when international pressure intensified, with the United States openly calling for Maduro's removal, the chaos entered an entirely new dimension. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some spoke of secret raids conducted by shadow operatives, others of government-backed squads rounding up suspected traitors. The truth is elusive, buried beneath conflicting testimonies, fragmented reports, and fear. Yet the human toll is undeniable. Mothers, fathers, children, families who lived their lives in the margins of power were suddenly caught in the crossfire of history. And when the dust settled, many of them were no longer there. Take the story of Rosa, a 34-year-old teacher in Caracas. She wasn't a political leader, nor was she an activist. Rosa's days were spent preparing lessons, trying to find enough rice and beans for her 2 children, and helping her elderly mother, who lived just 2 blocks away. On the evening of April 21st, neighbors reported hearing helicopters flying low over the rooftops. Hours later, Rosa's apartment was empty. The beds were unmade, her children's school books were scattered across the table, and dinner was left half-cooked on the stove. Witnesses said masked men had been seen moving in and out of the building, but no official statement ever acknowledged such an operation. To this day, Rosa and her children remain missing, and her mother keeps a light on in her window every night, hoping they will somehow come back. Her case is not unique. Across Venezuela, stories like Rosa's multiply. In Maracaibo, a family of 5 vanished the morning after a clash between armed militias and suspected foreign agents. In Valencia, a group of young men disappeared while returning from a protest where they carried nothing more than homemade banners demanding food. Relatives who searched hospitals, morgues, and detention centers were met with closed doors and vague responses. We have no record of them. Some families whisper that their loved ones were taken across the border to secret facilities. Others fear they were eliminated entirely, their names erased to prevent accountability. And yet, despite the terror, people continue to share these stories, unwilling to let silence become the final word. What makes these disappearances especially haunting is the uncertainty. Were they victims of a US-led operation designed to dismantle Maduro's networks from the inside? Or were they swept away by Maduro's own forces, fearful of betrayal during one of the most fragile moments of his rule? In war zones, truth often becomes the first casualty. And Venezuela, at that time, was a battlefield without front lines. Foreign interests clashed with local power, and civilians became invisible collateral. The result was an eerie void where families once stood. Their absence speaks louder. than any official press release or political speech. For the families who remain, life is a daily ritual of searching and remembering. Mothers line up outside government buildings holding faded photographs, begging for answers. Fathers wander border towns, hoping to catch a glimpse of a familiar face among the displaced. Children ask questions that no adult dares to answer. Why did Mama not come home? Why is Papa's phone turned off forever? These are not abstract debates about geopolitics. They are wounds carved into real lives. Every missing person leaves behind a ripple effect that crushes entire communities, breaking trust and hope in equal measure. And yet, despite the weight of despair, there is resilience. Underground networks of families have joined together, forming unofficial groups that collect testimonies, compare timelines, and archive evidence. They know the risk. Anyone who speaks too loudly could be next. But silence feels more dangerous than speaking. They gather in dimly lit living rooms, whispering the names of the missing as if to keep their memory alive. In those whispers, there is defiance. A refusal to let the disappeared vanish twice, once from the streets and once from memory. This story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. The struggle for power between governments, regimes, and foreign nations often forgets the human beings caught in the middle. Each strategy meeting, each military decision, each diplomatic maneuver can ripple into a tragedy for ordinary families. When superpowers clash, the weakest often pay the highest price. And in Venezuela, that price is measured not just in hunger or poverty, but in the haunting silence of absent voices. But perhaps the most chilling part of this story is its unresolved nature. Many of these cases remain open, unacknowledged, or deliberately buried. Without records, without confessions, without bodies, there can be no closure. And for the families, closure is everything. It is the difference between mourning and endless waiting, between accepting a loss and holding onto a fragile thread of hope. And so they wait, they light candles, they hold vigils, they print posters with faces that fade under the rain. Their resistance is quiet, but it is powerful. As we reflect on these disappearances, one question lingers. What does justice look like in a place where truth itself has been swallowed? Will these stories fade into the long history of Latin America's vanished? Or will they ignite a reckoning that forces the world to pay attention? The silence of the missing is deafening, but it is also a call. A call to remember them, to speak their names, and to acknowledge that behind the headlines and political battles, there are human lives worth mourning, worth fighting for, and worth remembering. Because in the end, the true tragedy is not just the disappearance of people, it is the disappearance of hope, trust, and humanity. And yet, as long as there are voices willing to tell their stories, as long as someone asks, where did they go? The disappeared are never truly gone. They live on in memory, in whispers, in questions that demand answers. And maybe, just maybe, their stories will one day bring the truth to light.